pure experiences.
Welcome to the Pure Experiences Podcasts. The polarity is not static, the poles are reversed. Sooner or later, everything has highs and lows, a rhythm. A master understands this law, and neutralizes it by staying steady, amidst the flow of polarities. Nothing is uncaused, and everything has an effect. One can get a firm hold on the consequences, by acting with awareness, and so rising above the cause and effect.
We are on the chapter 11th, Rhythm. Everything flows out and in, everything has its tides. All things rise and fall, the pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates in the Kybalion. The great fifth hermetic principle, the principle of rhythm, embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, a to and fro movement, a flow and inflow, a swing forward and backward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide between the two poles manifest on the physical, mental or spiritual planes. The principle of rhythm is closely connected with the principle of polarity described in the preceding chapter. A rhythm manifests between the two poles established by the principle of polarity. This does not mean, however, that the pendulum of rhythm swings to the extreme poles, for this rarely happens. In fact, it is difficult to establish the extreme polar opposites in the majority of cases. But the swing is ever towards first one pole and then the other. There is always an action and reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking, manifested in all the airs and phenomena of the universe. Suns, worlds, men, animals, plants, minerals, forces, energy, mind and matter. Yes, even spirit manifests this principle. The principle manifests in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life history of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. Beginning with the manifestations of spirit of the all, it will be noticed that there is ever the outpouring and indrawing, the outbreathing and inbreathing of Brahma, as the Brahmans word it. Universes are created, reach their extreme low point of materiality, and then begin their upward swing. Suns spring into being, and then their height of power being reached, the process of retrogression begins. And after eons, they become dead masses of matter, awaiting another impulse, which starts again their inner energies into activity, and a new solar life cycle is begun. And thus, it is with all the worlds. They are born, grow and die, only to be reborn. And thus, it is with all the things of shape and form. They swing from action to reaction, birth to death, from activity to inactivity and then back again. Thus, it is with all living things. They are born, grow and die, and then are reborn. So it is with all great movements, philosophies, creeds, fashions, governments, nations, and all else, birth, growth, maturity, decadence, death, and then new birth. The swing of the pendulum is ever in evidence. Night follows day, and day night, and the pendulum swings from summer to winter, and then back again. The corpuscles, atoms, molecules, and all masses of matter swing around the circle of their nature. There is no such thing as absolute rest or cessation from movement, and all movement partakes of rhythm. The principle is of universal application. It may be applied to any question or phenomena of any of the many planes of life. It may be applied to all phases of human activity. There is always the rhythmic swing from one pole to the other. The universal pendulum is ever in motion. The tides of life flow in and out according to law. The principle of rhythm is well understood by modern science and is considered a universal law as applied to material things. But the Hermetists carry the principle much further and know that its manifestations and influence extend to the mental activities of man, and that it accounts for the bewildering succession of moods, feelings, and other annoying and perplexing changes that we notice in ourselves. But the Hermetists, by studying and the operations of this principle, have learned to escape some of its activities by transmutation. The Hermetic masters long since discovered that principle, while the principle of rhythm was invariable and ever in evidence in mental phenomena, still there were two planes of its manifestation so far as mental phenomena are concerned. They discovered that there were two general planes of consciousness, the lower and the higher, the understanding of which fact enabled them to rise to the higher plane and thus escape the swing of the rhythmic pendulum which manifested on the lower plane. In other words, and the swing of the pendulum occurred on the unconscious plane, and the consciousness was not affected. This they call the law of neutralization. Its operations consists in raising of the ego above the vibrations of the unconscious plane of mental activity, so that the negative swing of the pendulum is not manifested in consciousness, and therefore they are not affected. It is akin to rising above a thing and letting it pass beneath you. And the Hermetic master or advanced student polarizes himself at the desired pole, and by a process akin to refusing to participate in the backward swing, or if you prefer, a denial of its influence over him, he stands firm in his polarized position and allows the mental pendulum to swing back along the unconscious plane. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery accomplish this more or less unknowingly and by refusing to allow their moods and negative mental states to affect them. They apply the law of neutralization. The master, however, carries this to a much higher degree of proficiency, and by the use of his will, he attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backward and forward by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. The importance of this will be appreciated by any thinking person who realizes that creatures of moods, feelings, and emotion the majority of people are, and how little mastery of themselves they manifest. If you will stop and consider a moment, you will realize how much these swings of rhythm have affected you in your life, how a period of enthusiasm has been invariably followed by an opposite feeling and mood of depression. Likewise, your moods and periods of courage have been succeeded by equal moods of fear, and so it has ever been with the majority of people. Tides of feeling have ever risen and fallen with them, but they have never suspected the cause or reason of the mental phenomena. An understanding of the workings of this principle will give one the key to the mastery of these rhythmic swings of feeling, and will enable him to know himself better and to avoid being carried away by these inflows and outflows. The will is superior to the conscious manifestation of this principle, although the principle itself can never be destroyed. We may escape its effects, but the principle operates nevertheless. The pendulum ever swings, although we may escape being carried along with it. So I read a few paragraphs, and I want to comment here that we have seen the principle of polarity, where things are found in forms of opposite poles. That is, the thing appears as a duality, a positive and negative appearance of one thing. The amazing fact is that this is not a static happening. It is not that the poles remain where they are. It is not the thing itself remains at one pole forever. It is a dynamic kind of event. The poles are transitory. They keep changing. And what does it change into? It changes into the opposite pole because it is only one thing. It cannot change into another thing, just like we read in the previous chapter. It can only change in polarity. So that is the law of rhythm. It keeps changing, and since they are processes in the existence, they are fundamental processes, so it happens mechanically. It happens automatically by itself. So whenever the one pole has manifested for a long time, it begins its swing towards the opposite pole. And the whole existence is this play of opposites. Without the opposites, there won't be any play. If you cancel the negative with the positive, you come up with a big zero. No play with zero. So our experience is seen as polar and dynamically so. It is dynamically polar. It is not static duality. The duality keeps swinging and changing into positive to negative, negative to positive. This happens in all the layers of the mind. The all and whatever its planes are there. Every plane has its own peculiar swings. So there are cycles within cycles. And in Eastern philosophies, now you will notice that there is a correspondence with the Kal or the cycles of the time. It is also called the Kal Chakra. Time is seen as circular in the Eastern philosophies. That is because the time is derived out of change, and the change is circular. The change is rhythmic in nature. That is why it is called vritti in Sanskrit. Everything is breathing this change. Everything is rotating. This is applied to from smallest atom to the Brahman itself, to the universal mind itself. So we also say that is a breathing of the Brahman. So one breath out and all the creation happens. All the eons pass. Countless amount of time passes. And when the in-breathing happens, it's all destroyed. After many, many eons and almost countless, infinite amount of time. This is the biggest cycle there is. And then there are smaller cycles and even more smaller cycles and so on, because it is all vibration, you see, from infinite time to infinitesimal time. This is the vibration, and the vibration happens in rhythm. So it is amazing to see, because this is our experience. Those who do not see this, they suffer the rhythm. They suffer because they want to keep everything as it is. That is height of the ignorance. It is not possible to keep everything as it is. This is the law. So there is a will to keep everything as it is. And a student or a master will execute his will and try to, neutralize the effects of rhythm. Although it is not really possible, but the mind can escape the suffering by being steady while the things flow. It is possible to flow the mind in the opposite direction when the experience is going in the negative direction. It is possible to do that. And the book says it is possible by the will. So will is above the law. But it is kind of an illusion, because there is a higher will there, which is manipulating the lower plane. That's all there is. So let's go further. There are other features of the operation of this principle of rhythm, of which we wish to speak at this point. There comes into its operations that which is known as the law of compensation. One of the definitions or meanings of the word compensate is to counterbalance, which is the sense in which the Hermetists use the term. It is this law of compensation to which the Kybalion refers when it says, the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The law of compensation is that the swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction, or to the opposite pole. The one balances or counterbalances the other. On the physical plane, we see many examples of this law. The pendulum of the clock swings a certain distance to the right and then an equal distance to the left. The seasons balance each other in the same way. The tides follow the same law, and the same law is manifested in all the phenomena of rhythm. The pendulum, with a short swing in one direction, has but a short swing in the other, while a long swing to the right invariably means the long swing to the left. An object hurled upwards to a certain height has an equal distance to traverse on its return. The force with which a projectile is sent upward a mile is reproduced when the projectile returns to the earth on its return journey. This law is constant on the physical plane, and as reference to the standard authorities will show you. But the Hermetists carry it still further. They teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man who enjoys keenly is subject to keen suffering, while he who feels but a little pain is capable of feeling but little joy. The pig suffers but little mentally and enjoys but little. He is compensated. And on the other hand, there are other animals who enjoy keenly, but whose nervous organism and temperament cause them to suffer exquisite degrees of pain. And so it is with man. There are temperaments which permit of but low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others which permit the most intense enjoyment, but also the most intense suffering. The rule is that the capacity for pain and pleasure in each individual are balanced. The law of compensation is in full operation here. But the Hermetists goes still further in this matter. They teach that before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far, proportionately, toward the other pole of feeling. They hold, however, that the negative is precedent to the positive in this matter. That is to say that in experiencing a certain degree of pleasure, it does not follow that he will have to pay up for it with a corresponding degree of pain. On the contrary, the pleasure is the rhythmic swing according to the law of compensation for a degree of pain of previously experienced either in the present life or in a previous incarnation. This throws a new light on the problem of pain. The Hermetists regard the chain of lives as continuous and as forming a part of one life of the individual, so that in consequence the rhythmic swing is understood in this way, while it would be without meaning unless the truth of reincarnation is admitted. But the Hermetists claim that the master or advanced student is able to a great degree to escape the swing towards pain by the process of neutralization before mentioned, by rising on the higher plane of the ego. Much of the experience that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane is avoided and escaped. My comment here is that, and there is often a question that is raised by newcomers, is that I have done nothing wrong in my life. I have always been loving, kind, and very happy person. And why do bad things happen to me? Why there is so much pain? Why there is so much suffering? And why are these cunning people, lowly people, why are they so rich? Why are they enjoying the life so much? Why good things happen to these bad people? And while the good people, they suffer, they are poor, they live a miserable life. Nobody likes them. While the most cunning and criminal kinds, everybody likes them, and everybody is, running after them, licking their feet. They have the power. They are extremely rich, charismatic. But when seen morally and intellectually, they are like insects. They are very, very lowly creatures. But the people who ask this question, they forget that this kind of polarity, this kind of polar behavior or polar experience that we are having is not only on the physical plane. Just look at the minds of those who appear happy outwardly, who have everything, who are surrounded by people all the time. Look at their minds also, and they will hide it, but they are miserable at mental level if they are comfortable at the physical level. The law of compensation will operate, it does not matter. And you can see a poor person, or you can see a totally unknown person, not so popular, not so powerful, not charismatic, and there will be peace in his life. There will be mental satisfaction and happiness there. There will be small pleasures in his life, tiny good things that happen instead of big good things. Because big good things always mean big bad things. The higher you rise, the greater is the fall. The bigger is the fall. The more painful is the fall. So we forget that there are different planes of existence. So we do not exist merely in the physical. This human mind has many layers, and it is immortal. It continues to live on. And so if there is a manifestation of suffering here, that simply means that in some other lifetime, in some other plane, or in inexplicable way, that mind has already experienced a lot of pleasure, and therefore the compensation is now happening. When you do not know that the mind is a multi-layered structure, exists in different planes, and exists almost infinitely, eternally in the time, then you will come up with such questions. These questions arise in the ignorance. Actually, all the questions, they arise in the ignorance only. But without questions, there is no knowledge also. So when you question like this, you will get such kind of answers. You will be shown the basic principles of the mental planes. It is because of this you are suffering, or it is because of that you are enjoying. And don't worry, it will reverse. This is the principle of rhythm. So the things do not stay at one pole forever. Sooner or later they reverse. So the greater the swing, the greater is the degree of the swing, the greater is the opposite degree, opposite swing also. The reaction is also bigger. So that's why a yogi is trying to still the mind. Not too much suffering, not too much pleasure. This is the blissful mind. So bliss does not mean extreme pleasure, like those, some people may misunderstand this like this. It means a very minuscule, tiny amount of swing in the mental planes. Those who are masters, they will take it further into the material plane and keep their bodies in a neutral position. It does not mean that it won't swing. It means that it swings very little, tiny amount. Because you cannot bypass the law, so you can only reduce the swing a little bit. This has to be done, this can be done by being aware of what the mind is doing. When it swings too much, bring it back. Hold its leash so that it does not go fly away in one direction too much. So this is the middle path. Avoid the extremes. Extreme of everything is bad, you see. This is a kind of negative law which derives out of the law of rhythm. So keep everything in check. This is the simple way of managing the consequences of extremes, that you become aware, keep everything in check. Because it is our experience that whenever we go to one extreme, whether it is pleasure or pain, the other extreme follows. Sometimes it follows very quickly actually. Within the same day you will see the effect sometimes. So too much partying, too much drinking, too much eating, and the following day is kind of painful. Too much pain. So if you eat in balance, there is bliss in the body. There is bliss in the mind. It may not be a pleasure, you see, but there will be peace. That is what we mean by staying in the middle. That is what we mean by being the sthita pragya, that is the stationary intellect. stationary mind. It is not swinging. It does not mean that it is a dead mind, brain dead person. No, it simply means that it is in bliss. There are two kinds of people, those who are not experienced in yoga, they will interpret and actions of a yogi in their own little ignorance in that way. When they see somebody living peacefully, not doing this too much, not doing that too much, and then they say he's brain dead. He's not enjoying the life. That is what has happened, is that the poor yogi has already enjoyed the life in quotes and now learned the lessons. So he keeps everything in check now. He likes the fineness of balance. He likes the neutrality of the existence more than the extremity of existence. While a newcomer, or an ignorant person likes the opposite. And this is a lesson actually. So those who have learned the lesson, they are seen as very stable, not doing much, but not doing nothing also. So you will need to observe the yogi very carefully, very, very carefully. Even the breathing has become very balanced. Do not even breathe in extreme. Do not talk in extreme. Actually, every action of the yogi or a jnani or a hermetist is very, very fine, very refined. So let us go forward. And the law of compensation plays an important part in the lives of men and women. It will be noticed that generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. If he has one thing, he lacks another. The balance is struck. No one can keep his penny and have the bit of cake at the same time. Everything has its pleasant and unpleasant sides. The things that one gains are always paid for by the things that one loses. The rich possess much that the poor lack, while the poor often possess things that are beyond the reach of the rich. The millionaire may have the inclination towards feasting and the wealth wherewith to secure all the dainties and luxuries of the table, while he lacks the appetite to enjoy the same. He envies the appetite and digestion of the laborer, who lacks the wealth and inclinations of the millionaire, and who gets more pleasure from his plain food than the millionaire could obtain, even if his appetite were not jaded, nor his digestion ruined. For the wants, habits, and inclinations differ, and so it is through life. The law of compensation is ever in operation, striving to balance and counterbalance, and always succeeding in time, even though several lives may be required for the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm. Chapter 12, Causation. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to the law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. And there are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. The Kybalion. So we are starting chapter on causation, which everybody will recognize who is familiar with the Eastern philosophies as the law of karma, the karmic law. This is the law of cause and effect. The great sixth Hermetic principle, the principle of cause and effect, embodies the truth that law pervades the universe, that nothing happens by chance, that chance is merely a term indicating cause existing but not recognized or perceived. That phenomena is continuous without break or exception. The principle of cause and effect underlies all scientific thought, ancient and modern, and was enunciated by the Hermetic teachers in the earliest days. While many and varied disputes between the many schools of thought that have since arisen, these disputes have been principally upon the details of the operations of the principle, and still more often upon the meaning of certain words. The underlying principle of cause and effect has been accepted as correct by practically all the thinkers of the world worthy of the name. To think otherwise would be to take the phenomena of the universe from the domain of law and order and to relegate it to the control of the imaginary something which men have called chance. A little consideration will show anyone that there is in reality no such thing as pure chance. Webster defines the word chance as follows: a supposed agent or mode of activity other than a force, law, or purpose. The operation or activity of such agent, the supposed effect of such an agent, a happening, fortuity, causality, etc. But a little consideration will show you that there can be no such agent as chance, in the sense of something outside of law, something outside of cause and effect. How could there be something acting in the phenomenal universe independent of the laws, order, and continuity of the later? Such as something would be entirely independent of the orderly trend of the universe, and therefore superior to it. We can imagine nothing outside of the law, the all being outside of the law, and that only because the all is the law in itself. There is no room in the universe for something outside of and independent of law, and the existence of such a something would render all natural laws ineffective and would plunge the universe into chaotic disorder and lawlessness. A careful examination will show that what we call chance is merely an expression relating to the obscure causes that we cannot perceive, causes that we cannot understand. The word chance is derived from a word meaning to fall, as the falling of dice. And the idea being that the fall of the dice and many other happenings are merely a happening, unrelated to any cause. And this is the sense in which the term is generally employed. But when the matter is closely examined, it is seen that there is no chance whatsoever about the fall of the dice. Each time a die falls and displays a certain number, it obeys a law as infallible as that which governs the revolution of the planets around the sun. Back of the fall of the die are causes, or chains of causes, running back further than the mind can follow. The position of the die in the box, the amount of muscular energy expended in the throw, and the condition of the table, etc., etc. All are causes, the effect of which may be seen. But back to these seen causes, there are chains of unseen preceding causes, all of which had a bearing upon the number of the die which fell uppermost. If a die be cast a great number of times, it will be found that the numbers shown will be about equal. That is, there will be an equal number of 1 spot, 2 spot, etc. coming uppermost. Toss a penny in the air, and it may come down either heads or tails, but make a sufficient number of tosses, and the heads and tails will about even up. This is the operation of the law of average. But both the average and single toss come under the law of cause and effect. And if we were able to examine into the preceding causes, it would be clearly seen that it was simply impossible for the die to fall other than it did, under the same circumstances and at the same time. Given the same causes, the same results will follow. There is always a cause and a because to every event. Nothing ever happens without a cause, or rather a chain of causes. So my comment here is that the book is saying that there is no such thing as randomness. The randomness is the proper scientific word which we commonly call as chance. So the book is saying there is no such thing as chance. It is merely our ignorance, and that is also a scientific fact. It has been established that an event which looks like random has a cause, a law that is beyond our current knowledge. So there is never a random event in the physical universe. Everything has a chain of causes, and the only thing is you cannot know all the causes, but you know that there are causes. Nothing happens without a cause. So this is our experience. And whenever we have an experience of a chance, it is a reflection of our ignorance that this has happened. And since there are so many planes of existence, so something which looks like random in, let us say, a lower plane, let us say the physical plane, has a cause in the higher plane. And we should keep this in the mind, because this is generally forgotten. We think that the universe is a closed system where one cause is causing an effect, and the effect is causing another cause. No, it is kind of open-ended. The causes come into the physical existence, go out of the physical existence. They have effects of all kinds. It is all very, very dense. It is all very, very complicated. The law of cause and effect. It's probably the most complicated law, probably the most difficult to understand. The karmic laws are beyond human mind, actually. But we can have an idea about it. So let us go forward. Some confusion has arisen in the minds of persons considering this principle, from the fact that they were unable to explain how one thing could cause another thing. That is, be the creator of the second thing. As a matter of fact, no thing ever causes or creates another thing. A cause and effect deals merely with events. An event is that which comes, arrives or happens as a result or consequent of some preceding event. No event creates another event, but is merely a preceding link in the great orderly chain of events flowing from the creative energy of the all. There is a continuity between all events, precedent, consequent, and subsequent. And there is a relation existing between everything that has gone before and everything that follows. A stone is dislodged from a mountain side and crashes through a roof of a cottage in the valley below. At first sight, we regard this as a chance effect, but when we examine the matter, we find a great chain of causes behind it. In the first place, there was the rain which softened the earth, supporting the stone, and which allowed it to fall. Then back of that was the influence of the sun, other rains, etc., which gradually disintegrated the piece of rock from a larger piece. And then there were the causes which led to the formation of the mountain and its upheaval by the convolutions of nature, and so on ad infinitum. Then we might follow up the causes behind the rain, etc. Then we might consider the existence of the roof. In short, we would soon find ourselves involved in a mesh of cause and effect, from which we would soon strive to extricate ourselves. Just as a man has 2 parents, and 4 grandparents, and 8 great-grandparents, and 16 great-great-grandparents, and so on, until when, say, 40 generations are calculated, the numbers of ancestors run into many millions. So it is with the number of causes behind even the most trifling event or phenomena, such as the passage of a tiny speck of soot before your eye. It is not an easy matter to trace the bit of soot back to the early period of the world's history when it formed a part of the massive tree trunk, which was afterward converted into coal, and so on, until as the speck and a mighty chain of events, causes and effects, brought it to its present condition, and the later is but one of the chain of events which will go to produce other events hundreds of years from now. One of the series of events arising from the tiny bit of soot was the writing of these lines, which caused the typesetter to perform certain work, the proofreader to do likewise, and which will arouse certain thoughts in your mind, and there are others which in turn will affect others, and so on and so on and on, beyond the ability of man to think further, and all from the passage of a tiny bit of soot. All of which shows the relativity and association of things, and the further fact that there is no great and there is no small in the mind that caused all. Stop to think a moment. If a certain man had not met a certain maid away back in the dim period of the Stone Age, you who are now reading these lines would not now be here. And if perhaps the same couple had failed to meet, we who write these lines would not now be here. And the very act of writing on our part and the act of reading on yours will affect not only the respective lives of yourselves and ourselves, but will also have a direct or indirect effect upon many other people now living and who will live in the ages to come. Every thought we think, every act we perform has direct and indirect results which fit into the great chain of cause and effect. So my comment here is that this stuff is very familiar to you, the stuff of cause and effect. The less familiar things are even the tiniest of our action have an effect. This is not known to ordinary people. The tiniest bit of action that we do every day has an effect somewhere. And even the tiniest bit of speech, the words we choose, they have effect. And so on, because it is multi-layered. Even the thoughts have an effect. The desires have an effect. And our lives are governed by these causes. So is there control on what is being caused? Now that can be a matter of debate. That is called the will of the person. So is there a will? There is certainly a way to either stop or start an effect. There is a way that we know. That can be caused or that can be random. Now people are debating about these things. The only thing is that we do not know that which caused a willing can have a cause somewhere else in some other plane. We do not know that. And that is why we think it is our doing. That is why we think that it is caused by me. So the me itself is an effect caused by something else which is beyond our conscious mind. So this is the problem. This is the thing that we do not know. Let us see what the book says about this thing. We do not wish to enter into a consideration of free will or determinism in this work for various reasons. Among the many reasons is the principal one that neither side of the controversy is entirely right. In fact, both sides are partially right. According to the Hermetic teachings, the principle of polarity shows that both are but half-truths, the opposing poles of truth. The teachings are that a man may be both free and yet bound by necessity, depending upon the meaning of the terms and the height of truth from which the matter is examined. The ancient writers express the matter thus: the further the creation is from the center, the more it is bound, and nearer the center it reaches, the nearer, the more free it is. So, as I said, that the book is bypassing this debate, because whenever there is a paradox, whenever it looks like both things are true, yes, there is cause and effect, there are laws, and so the mind must have its own laws, but there is this free will also. So we have two things that are opposing each other, polar opposites, but at the same time, present at the same time. Paradox. So whenever there is a paradox, you must have noticed a greater picture is lacking, because we do not see the whole picture, we see parts of it, and they appear as opposites. We get confused, we cannot think clearly, and therefore the debate happens. Such debates are a waste of time. It is best to rise one plane above where it is happening and see the whole picture. So you will find, like the book says, and the further the creation is from the center, the more is bound by the cause and effect kind of laws. So you will find the matter is bound totally by causation. It cannot move. It has no will, you see. The rock has no will of its own. But as it grows, as it evolves towards the spirit, towards the center of the creation, becomes living. And then you can see little bit of will appearing in an animal or an insect and so on. And it looks like will, but there is a chain of event there also. It is caused in some manner, and we can discover this. We can find it out, what caused it. And as you rise upwards in the mind, you will find there are more and more causes that look like will. So it looks like free will only from the lower perspective. From a higher perspective, it looks like law. It looks like deterministic. So whatever a human is doing is determined by whatever is in his memory. You rise to the plane of the mind and you will find determinism there. But when you are in the society, when you are in the human domain or in the physical universe, the universe of the body, then it looks like free will. So look at it from the higher perspective. And now what is determining the mind, the mental events? There is a chain of causation there in the higher planes, and it will look like a will of the higher plane. It will look like my karmic sanskars. Then this memory of the jeev, the memory of the causal body, is determining whatever I am right now. You see, this is mentioned in many of the Eastern philosophies, including Buddhism, Jainism, and all, that our karmic structure determines completely what we do. So the way I'm speaking right now, the way I'm sitting right now, everything is already determined. Even to the extent that all the events in my life are determined. This will be said, and therefore it is they try to predict what will happen in your life. This is the whole science of astrology, which is not really science, you see. So it is an ignorance that we do not see that there is a plane of freedom from which the events arise and they manifest as deterministic events in the lower planes. And where does it end? It does not end, you see, because the planes do not end. They go to infinity. So let us keep this in our mind when we are caught in such kind of debates or such kind of confusion that there is no cause and effect. It's like throwing the baby with the bathwater. Do not throw the baby. Babies are useful. So the law of cause and effect is very useful when you want to function in the world. But you may want to consider something else, and in spiritual business. So let us go forward. The majority of people are more or less slaves of heredity, environment, etc., and manifest very little freedom. They are swayed by the opinions, customs, and thoughts of the outside world, and also by their emotions, feelings, moods, etc. They manifest no mastery worthy of the name. They indignantly repudiate this assertion, saying, "Why, I certainly am free to act and do as I please. I do just what I want to do." But they fail to explain whence arise the want to and as I please. What makes them want to do one thing in preference to another? What makes them please to do this and not do that? Is there no because to their pleasing and wanting? The master can change these pleases and wants into others at the opposite end of the mental pole. He is able to will. Instead of to will because some feeling, mood, emotion, or environmental suggestion arouses a tendency or desire within him. So to do. The majority of people are carried along like the falling stone, obedient to environment, outside influences, and internal moods, desires, etc. Not to speak of the desires and wills of the others stronger than themselves, heredity, environment, and suggestion, carrying them along without resistance on their part, or the exercise of the will, moved like the pawns on the checkerboard of life. They play their parts and are laid aside after the game is over. But the masters, knowing the rules of the game, rise above the plane of material life and placing themselves in touch with the higher powers of their nature, dominate their own moods, characters, qualities, and polarity, as well as the environment surrounding them, and thus become movers in the game instead of pawns, causes instead of effects. The masters do not escape the causation of the higher planes, but fall in with the higher laws and thus master circumstances on the lower plane. And they thus form a conscious part of the law instead of being mere blind instruments. While they serve on the higher planes, they rule on the material plane. So my comment here is that, and there is a word, very beautiful word here, willing to will. So what can be the meaning of that? A master can will to will. And that means there are categories of willing. Now, we don't want to go into that depth of free will and determinism here, because like the book said, don't go there. It's complicated. But I'm going one step ahead, forward, that there are different kinds of wills. The will of an ordinary person, an ignorant person, is simply programming in their mind. They feel in certain way and they do it, and then they say, I willed it. I did this because I wanted to do this. You see? So when I'm hungry and I go and eat something in my kitchen, it looks like that I did that because of my will. But what has happened is that it was a doing of the body. The body produced an impulse, and the mind simply commanded the body because it remembers that there is food there and goes and eats it. That's all has happened. It is purely mechanical. The I willed is really an illusion here. It is only thought in the mind. So can you will to not become hungry? Not possible, isn't it? Not possible for an ordinary person. But there is another layer in the mind, which is the layer of awareness. So as soon as this impulse arises in the lower parts of the mind or the body, this awareness notes that this event has happened. Now it can stop and think for a while. Now the thing is, I won't be able to stop eating totally, but then I can decide, today is my fast. I have decided to not eat today, or eat at a certain time after only a certain time. This is some kind of practice. This is a discipline. The discipline involves raising of awareness. It's not about food, which people forget. Anyway, that is besides the point. So this awareness controls the lower will. The higher will controls the lower will. And now I decide not to eat till 12 o'clock or something. People do this, and the whole purpose of this practice of fasting is to strengthen the willing to will, which I usually call as awareness. You should be aware of the body, the environment, the surrounding, the people, and also of your own mind. Otherwise, you won't be able to will to will. It's a beautiful phrase, actually. And then who is willing to will? There is another higher plane there. If your awareness rises to that much, you will find that the will to control the will of the lower has a cause somewhere. It is a bigger mind. It is a greater mind, about which we won't say right now, but it has another cause. But it is more free. There's more freedom. So as we rise in the planes, we find more and more freedom, less and less mechanical behavior. So when you master this, to an ordinary person, it looks like that you have superpowers. See, the powers are a gift from the Mother Nature. It is not magic. It is just law. When you know the laws, you can manipulate them. But you cannot manipulate the higher ones. Higher than where you are, you can manipulate the lower ones. So those who have mastered this kind of willing to will, they are so poised, they are so stable, and they have so much control over many things actually. Many things, not only the mind and speech and body, around the environment and on all other people around that come in their contact. It is amazing. It is very amazing to see a guru or a yogi influence people. Although he is not talking about anything, big knowledge, although he is not doing extraordinary, simply his presence affects people around him, because so conscious, embodiment of consciousness. So whatever he does, even his looks are, movement of the eyes look like totally willed, not random. Nothing is random in their life. And they know a lot about these things, because the higher you rise, the bigger picture comes in awareness. And so you see cause and effect like nobody else can see. So this is your own experience actually. I'm not telling you anything new. This is your own experience. Just look at your life, the past. This has happened. As you, when you were a child, nothing was really in control. It happened very, very slowly. The will also arose as we aged. So that's why the older people, they are more in control, they are more stable and more peaceful. Although not all old people, you see, there are ignorant old people also. So in general, the older the person is, the wiser the person becomes. So this was my comment. Hopefully I did not go too far from the subject. Okay, so last paragraph. But on a higher and lower, the law is always in operation. And there is no such thing as chance. And the blind goddess has been abolished by reason. We are able to see now, with eyes made clear by knowledge, that everything is governed by universal law, and that the infinite number of laws are but manifestations of the one great law, the law, which is the all. It is true indeed that not a sparrow drops unnoticed by the mind of the all, and that even the hairs on our head are numbered, as the scriptures have said. There is nothing outside of law, nothing that happens contrary to it. And yet, do not make the mistake of supposing that man is but a blind automaton. Far from that. The Hermetic teachings are that man may use law to overcome laws, and that the higher will always prevail against the lower, until at last he has reached the stage in which he seeks refuge in the law itself and laughs the phenomenal laws to scorn. Are you able to grasp the inner meaning of this? That is the end of the chapter. And if you have, those who are listening, if you have any comments, please, you're most welcome. And if you have any doubts or any questions, if you could not understand something in this chapter, because I know this is very complicated. It is summarized in 2 or 3 pages, which is amazing, isn't it? The essence is given here and in a very beautiful language. But there is a lot to be said about the cause and effect. And I'll drop my comment here that ultimately there is no cause and effect. Ultimately, all is uncaused. The law has no cause. So this is beyond human mind, actually. This is beyond knowledge, why it is so. But at the highest level, it is total freedom. It is total randomness at the highest. Can you imagine? Because this is the all, you see. It is always going to be paradoxical. It is always going to be beyond logic, beyond intellect, beyond the buddhi. So what we can do as humans is know that what is causing what. Now it is very useful if you know what causes what in the physical world, isn't it? All our technology comes from knowledge of cause and effect. So striking 2 stones together causes fire. That started our journey away from animal nature, taming a fire, isn't it? So we know that dropping a seed into the soil causes, so-called cause, in the plant to grow. So we started growing our own food. And this is how we evolved, by knowing the nature of cause and effect. We know how to tame the forces now, even the greater forces, the electricity, magnetism, nuclear force, and so on. So it is, technology is nothing but an understanding of cause and effect. And the physics is nothing but knowledge of cause and effect. Understanding the law, writing it down in form of very sophisticated language, that is called mathematics, language of reason, and utilizing this knowledge for making our lives comfortable. Those who do not have this knowledge, they are also benefited by knowledge of the others. So we are the users of the technology most of the time, not the inventors. The point here is that it should be taken forward into the higher layers. Know what is happening in the body. Know what is happening in the ego. And know what is happening in the mind. What is happening in the awareness. And so on. Rise above this physical only mode where we are stuck since many, many lifetimes. Why? We don't know. Because no knowledge of cause and effect. So the laws of the mind are going to revolutionize the technology. And from the era of the technology of the matter, we are going to evolve into the technology of the mind. When the mental cause and effects are known, written down in a very technical language, and exploited just like a master exploits the lower planes, we will have something which people call as superpowers. There will be mastery over everything, over the body, over the mind, over Mother Nature. Mother Nature means the physical one, physical layer. This has already started, you must have seen. And I'll, add my personal note here. This has already happened many times on this planet. Many times the technology evolved so much that we became gods. Humans or whatever creatures were there, they became like gods, super powerful people. And then because of the law of rhythm, the swing of the pendulum, it all comes down. And this must happen. Physical is not a very stable place, you must have noticed. Things keep changing very, very drastically here. So, and higher you rise, more stable it is in one way actually, where there is acceptance of instability and detachment from instability. So right now we are like pawns in the hands of Mother Nature because of this ignorance of cause and effect. Saying that there is randomness, there is no cause and effect, and somebody is doing this chance by chance and all, there is a will and all, well, it will keep you ignorant. It will keep you at the lower layers. Blind beliefs, superstitions. It's not going to make you progress. What is going to make you progress is the knowledge. Knowledge of cause and effect. So you know all the cause and effects that you encounter every day in the physical world, but have you paid attention to what is causing events in the mind? Are you paying attention to the mind? We call it as my mind, and so there is no gap between the I and the mind. Look at it, it's not my mind. The mind is an add-on to what is happening, to the experience of the mind. This mind is not my mind. It's nobody's mind actually. Nobody has a mind. We are all mindless, pure consciousness. So this is the experience of the mind. Nobody likes to say it like this because it looks like I'm calling you stupid. But no, the mind is not there. It's not my mind. So when you make a distance like this between the events of the mind and the experiencer of the events, you will be able to study what is happening. That is the rise of the awareness there. The light will shine in that dark area, which is now totally in darkness, where you don't know what is happening. And so these forces are governing our lives. And so the experience is not optimal. I'm not saying it's a bad experience. It's all learning experience actually. It is whatever is happening is that which must happen, isn't it? It is all perfect. But you see, some people may not like to stagnate here. Okay, I learned many, many lessons now. Now what? Now rise above. You see, there is no end to the evolution of the mind. You can rise above. And as we rise above, the more things come into picture, more awareness, and the willing to will happens, more control comes over the body, actions of the body and mind. And the final thing that a human can do is to stop being a human. That is the mukti. That is the liberation from the birth and death. Because they are also caused. Now you don't know. You say, we are just born and we think that this is me, the thing that is born. It is a body. It is an accumulation of matter. It is going to go away. It has accumulated and it will disperse back into from where it came. Calling it as I is just a sign of ignorance. Calling it as my body, ignorance upon ignorance. It's not my body. So it is being governed by the laws. How can you call it mine? You cannot control it. And so is the mind, especially the lower mind. It is governed by some laws, programming that has happened as we grow and as we, take births upon births upon births. There is another layer there where the layer of the causal body where all the sanskars, the karmic structure is stored, whatever happened throughout all the lives, and that is the cause of what is happening now. So as soon as you rise above the causal, the births, you can will to stop the births and deaths. You can stop this vritti, the circular unnecessary activity. Now, why is it unnecessary? At that level, it will be unnecessary. At that level, when you rise at that level, it will be unnecessary. Right now, it is necessary to live for everybody who are here. So do not kill yourself to rise. That is not the proper way. The proper way is to know. Knowledge is the proper way. So I'll stop here because it is a big subject actually. If you want to know more, I have recorded a few podcasts on the cause and effect and the laws of the mind, where it's a 15 or 16 part series on my podcast page. So if you feel like knowing a lot about the principle of cause and effect or the karmic laws, you are most welcome. It is all being served. So it is not that the knowledge is not there, and there has to be a will to know, because there is so much ignorance. The will is absent altogether. So when we encounter a master, we see that he has mastered something. The will arises. This is how we evolve actually, under the shade of this big tree of masters. Otherwise, we don't come to know these things. Do we know that there are mental laws? Do we know that there is mental technology? It is called yoga, by the way. You don't think yoga in that way. You think the yoga is a weight loss program. So it is not totally unknown thing. The whole knowledge is here. The knowledge has been served.
Pure experiences.
You were listening to Pure Experiences by Tharun Pradhan.